There we go. Appreciate it, Joni. All right, cool. So unless there's anything else, I will hand it over to Jeff and Aaron. All yours.
All right, thank you very
Sure.
much. I'm gonna kick things off for everyone. My name is Jeff Beck. I'm actually a product marketing manager at Red Hat, and so I know just enough about Quarkus to be dangerous. So I'm kind of serving as the MC and kicking things off. We have a small enough crowd here where I can't encourage you enough to just speak up. This is our 37th or so world tour stop. And the ones that have been, in my opinion, the most interesting and impactful, we've had people just coming off mute and asking questions. I consider it, and we consider it, a success if we have to even cut things short and leave out some of the demo part, because that means we've had some interesting dialogue. So hopefully you all feel comfortable. You'll know shortly from Aaron and I, our personalities, where we actually would encourage that. So feel free to chime in. it'll make it a hell of a lot more interesting for all of us. And with that being said, normally this is a how many rock shows have you seen with one performer? This is actually going to be an acoustic set because Aaron is going to be flying solo right now. Normally what we try to do is have a couple of folks on the line. And what I like is that each tour stop is slightly different because we have different presenters each time. And so typically what we like to do is have that presenter just focus on what they know about Quarkus. I mean, you can't know every extension and all the ins and outs. So really you get a different flavor each time. And I think that's part of the kind of the magic of this. We love this concept, this idea of a tour stop, and the kind of the homage to the old rock and roll stuff. So we do have some t-shirts that have the kind of the Quarkus World Tour, a throwback to the 80s style arena rock and roll concert. So we'll get you guys some of those shortly here. So with that being said, Aaron, can you go to the next, kind of go to the 2 slides?
This one.
Yep.
This one. That's you and me,
yeah.
Kiddo.
That's good. Let's go to the next one.
And that's all you guys, because that's awesome. And again, please do ask the questions. Just
absolutely.
Okay.
So here, I just wanted to set the stage. You all obviously know that Java has been, the workhorse of enterprise software development. You guys are all obviously Java developers, and what is it, 26 years old? I think it was 25 last summer, so it's 26 years old this summer or now. And really, why is Quarkus important? And really, this is an interesting time it's an inflection point for Java and for application development in general. And we all know that Java was created for a different time, and it's evolving quickly now. A year ago we would have said it's trying to catch up, but really obviously Java was, from a more traditional perspective, was worried more about throughput at the expense of footprint, and long running applications are the norm, and so startup speed wasn't as important. And having a rich dynamic behavior for systems that were that were mutable was all kind of the rage. And so now we're looking at cloud native, right? It's a whole new world. And having millions of Java developers out there, some of them are starting to, look at the whole new world of serverless and cloud native development on Kubernetes. And when we think of cloud native, we're kind of flipping that on its axis in terms of, now we're worried about, we handle throughput by scaling, adding more pods. We look at these immutable systems, we can start them up and shut them down just as quickly. So startup times become important, and memory becomes important. And so as we look at those startup times in memory, as we scale to hundreds and thousands of pods, it becomes extremely important. So just wanted to set the stage in terms of backup. So this is what Quarkus was essentially founded. At this point, the community project is about a little over 2 years now. And the tagline still holds true, and it's pretty catchy, is that supersonic subatomic Java, which obviously is a kind of tongue-in-cheek way of saying that it's extremely fast, extremely small, and it makes Java kind of relevant in this new day and age. So next slide.
I was getting there. I have my tea in my hand. I had to put it down.
I'm getting ahead of myself here. I'm trying to get out of the way, as you guys can see, because I'm not the star of the show. I'm the opening act that no one remembers. So what I wanted to say, obviously, is that Quarkus is it's Kubernetes native, and it's tailored for both OpenJDK Hotspot and Graal VM. I'm sure you all are interested in seeing more about Graal, and Graal is is top of mind for every Java developer now, or a lot of Java developers. It's kind of the backbone of our native capabilities, and as well as Spring, right? Spring is now, I think, in beta for their native compilation. So, Quarkus makes Java extremely compelling as a framework for cloud native. One of the things we love, and Aaron's going to show you a bunch of this, is that, so what makes Quarkus different, especially now that Spring has got a native capability? We can go to the ins and outs of which one's better, and we're not going to do that. But one of the things that we like is the fact that Quarkus is extremely friendly to Java developers. And we always say, it's bringing some joy back to Java developers. We know that's debatable, highly debatable, but Aaron's going to show you a bunch of cool features, capabilities that make this nice for developers. All right, next. I think it's so one of the most exciting things that people typically talk about is the dev mode. The ability to just write code and refresh your browser and have it show up, and not having to wait for compilation and all those kind of things. So Aaron's going to show that right away. But next slide, Eric. Aaron, I may even have you do this one, because you'll probably do a better job in terms of, I love to set the stage why Quarkus is different. You want to grab this one for me?
Sure. So, okay. In all honesty, given the history lesson that we just had about where Java started, I started programming as an official person in 1999 at IBM, writing C and C++ and JNI code to run big WebSphere on ZOS, which was like a combination of Java and EBCDIC for greatness, right? Anyway, so all of the jokes that we tell about how long app servers took to load, I lived it, because even just building the app server to attempt to run the test meant not only a cup of tea, but also maybe a snack from the vending machine down the hall. Like, everything just took forever. So when we talk about how a framework starts with these various stages here, there's what we're doing now from a cloud native perspective. There's what we have in our head if we're still writing. Oh man, I still meet traditional WebSphere developers, and I built Liberty from scratch, and I feel for them, because I'm like, we built Liberty for you, and now I'm working on this other thing, because that's pain, right? So we have all of this shared Java pain, right? Where you have to do Maven. Maven downloads the internet. Once we figure out what then we download our internet, we compile things, we package things, we send it over to maybe we put it in a WAR file first. Maybe we do some esoteric deployment manager that's going to go roll things out into the ocean, but we're reading config files. We are then starting this thing. And how many of you do the old school imperative, like top down, you have the central thing that then has to iterate through all of the things, top down versus dependency injection, right? At least if you're using Spring, or if you're using OSGI, you're doing dependency injection, right? Inversion of control. But you still have to get all of those little pieces discovered, found, injected, bound. All those things take time. Maybe it's building an internal model of the world. Then we start the thread pools, then we start the things, and depending on your systems, that could take a lot of steps. And then you're ready, right? So when I was writing Liberty the first time, we had read the config file, bootstrap all of our base processes, the kernel's ready, then we're going to load all of the dynamic features, get all those things bounded, then we're ready. So it's like we even had 2 steps. Joni, with Spring, how many? We've got Spring does its config file, config parsing, reading, then it goes through and looks through all of the auto configuration steps and all the auto configuration beans. Not that necessarily takes forever, but it does all those things, right? And then it puts it all together, and then we're ready. So that's what this is trying to show you. And so what Quarkus tries to do, and this would apply to a Spring app or to a Liberty app, like conceptually what we're trying to do, especially if you guys are familiar with dynamic injection of dependencies, with dependency injection instead of like the command and control kind of model of initialization, is we're trying to hotwire or remember those connections up front at build time. So we will still go through all of the Maven package steps. There is a subset of the configuration we read at build time. Between Quarkus core and some of what the extensions do, they will at build time scan for annotations, parse the metadata, look for this service bounds to this service, and this binds to this service, and this needs this, and this needs this, and it will remember that. It will literally bake it into bytecode. And then at runtime, you're just running the bytecode. There may be some dynamic pieces left that it needs to do because those aren't ready, like credentials. We don't bake those in. We get those later, right? So there's some configuration stuff that's read at runtime, but as much as possible, we've pulled into build time. So everything is effectively hot wired, and all you have to do is turn it on. Does that make sense? It is very different. It is a very different way of working, and depending on how the conversation goes, we can talk about how that works later. But it boils down into these couple things, right? We are, as we look at how to integrate libraries, and Joni knows this because I've been working with Micrometer. This is why I know Joni, like we work on Micrometer together, right? It's like when we look at bringing support for a third-party library to Quarkus, one of the things we're trying to do is figure out how much can we figure out and pre-bind or pre-understand at build time, and then how much still has to be deferred to runtime. And the side effect is that third bullet. And this is something where dead code path analysis is something that GraalVM is well known for because of the errors that you get when you're running in native mode, because the code is just not there, which is unexpected. But Quarkus already, because of how much it does at build time, already in some cases does a poor man's form of dead code elimination before the stuff is run. If in the case of Micrometer, for example, with the extension that I have, if annotations aren't present, if they're not used, if a class that I need isn't found, there's just whole reams of stuff that doesn't happen. I just skip it. I've decided the code path is dead. So the beans aren't registered, the stuff's not there, it's just gone. I just skip a whole bunch of steps. And a bunch of the other extensions do that also. And so that also trims down your startup time, trims down your memory footprint, because the stuff just isn't there. Does that
Aaron,
make sense?
I want to chime in real quick.
Absolutely. That's why I was gonna throw it back to you awkwardly.
I'm trying to gauge the audience a little bit here. It looks like we have a mix of people who've used Quarkus or familiar with Quarkus, and then probably we've got some folks Quarkus is brand new, or maybe they've heard about it. We do also have a few people that have used GraalVM before or are interested in it. So we kind of got the a gamut of what we typically have. I haven't put this in there yet, but I'm assuming we've got a bunch of Spring Boot developers as well as Java EE. I see head shaking. What we aren't going to talk about tonight, but I'm gonna try to find some links to some things. We've got a ton of libraries and compatibility layer for Spring Boot. So if you are comfortable and you know the Spring APIs, Quarkus has a bunch of great compatibility layer to make to allow you to use those existing ones. Aaron's not going to go into it specifically, but we've got a bunch of great things if you're a Spring Boot developer, want to know how they're different, or how you would take a Spring Boot app and migrate it and all those good things.
I can talk to it a little. That was one of my first things, was doing some of the Spring Data JPA stuff, but
there we go. I didn't want to put you on the spot too much.
Yeah, what I can't do off the cuff, because I am not a developer advocate, I actually write code for my life, real code, is I'm not super good at throwing like demos of all the things, because that's not what I do every day. So that's where I get a little uncomfortable. It's like, I know how that works. I don't know if I can off the cuff write a demo for you, but we can talk through how any of that works, and I think.
Great. So. That's all I've got.
Yeah. All right.
I think that covers it, right?
Yeah. The next, it was just us playing. So let me stand up now. I'm sitting there, all comfortable. Okay, you guys can see my terminal window. Is it big enough? Yay! Yes. Thumbs up. I love that I can see people's faces. Thank you. Super duper. Okay, so what I have been working on, Joni will tell you, I've mentioned it a couple times already, was Micrometer, but now lately I've also been working a lot on the CLI. So For Quarkus 2.0, which was what, Jeff? The June, early June? Was when
It
2.0 came out?
was, no, late June. It was like last week of June.
Oh, okay. That just feels like forever ago because I
Yeah,
went
it
to
does.
Michigan and came back. Right. Okay, good. Vacation brain. So for the release of Quarkus 2, we did a lot of work to revamp and pay a lot more attention to how our command line works, which has had some knock-on effects to some other tools and where it's not a done effort yet. But so there is another tool, which I will mention in passing, called JBang. JBang aims to make, well, I think Max has a non-goal to just break all Java rules, period. But one of the things he wants to do is make Java feel a little more like you could use Java to write your scripts, right? You don't only have Python and Bash as like your shell script choices. You could use Java and write scripts with it. And so he's got some tricks around JBang for installing CLIs and other things. I know there's SDK Man and all the other ones, but you can use JBang to install a Quarkus command. We can go through more of that later if you would like. It has a bunch of subcommands in it. We will play with some of them. What we're going to start with real quick is we're just going to create an app. And this changed recently, so now I can just say world tour. All right, starting with a Q. And this is just going to use rest easy for right now. We'll come back and do more things later. So that should have created, if I go into my little world tour directory, it exists here. And I can start VS Code, which hopefully should start. Haha, we can even start it on the same screen. Sometimes it remembers what I wanted it to do. So our code generation stuff is pretty straightforward. Code generation is not anything new. We generated, this will be changing soon. We have a whole bunch of new stuff coming for how we track versions and manage bombs and dependencies, because dependency hell is a thing. We all know it and it sucks. So we're trying to make that a little easier to deal with. We have a test directory that came up. We've got a main directory that came up. We have a greeting resource that's super simple. This is basic rest easy stuff. We have a test that was generated, that's happiness. So now if I say Quarkus dev, it will not download the internet because like every smart baker, I did that ahead of time. But it will build my source and it will start a port and it'll start this. And this is what Jeff was talking about when he mentioned the dev console earlier. So it is running, but you notice I have a prompt here. And most interestingly, it's giving me a message that says there's tests that are paused. Well, that's interesting. So let's resume the test and see what happens. Oh, hey, it's going to run that test I have. Oh, okay, and it passed. So that's great. So now if I want to make another endpoint, let's add the test first because behavior-driven testing is my favorite thing ever. I'm not so keen on micro unit testing, but I'll take BDD any day of the week. This is a nice outside of the box test. We're just going to say goodbye. And now if I save that, it's going to be like, well, you don't have that endpoint, barf, which is the correct answer. Good job, test. So if I go over here and I say, all right, we're going to call this goodbye because my imagination is awesome. And then the only last thing we have to do is we do have to separate the paths for these two endpoints on this resource. And if I save it, why is only one passing? What did I forget? That says goodbye, that says goodbye, that says goodbye, that says goodbye, that says goodbye. What did I fail? I still am failing. It was a 404.
The test said greeting, not.
Yeah. Oh, did it? See, it said goodbye. But why would it get, yeah, okay. No, it's something else. There's goodbye, rest easy. You guys are all smarter than me.
You're also testing.
It says good die
instead of goodbye.
Yeah, good die.
You guys are all smarter than me.
You're angry. You're very angry.
There, I'm so mad at it.
Good
I'm
die.
missing my letters.
Die, rest easy.
Community development for the win. Okay, there we go. But so that was me adding an endpoint, well, adding the failing test, then adding the endpoint, then fixing my failing test with the help of more eyeballs than mine. That was all super great. And I didn't have to restart the server or any of that. There are some limits, of course, for how much can keep running. But it is pretty ridiculous with how much happens. The other thing that's fun about this is I can just go from here and I can open dev mode and it'll pop up my dev mode browser right from there. So that was pretty cool. But what I want to do, because Joni's here and I want to show off, it's gonna be like, dude, I did not come here for you to say my name every 5 seconds. But you showed up, so there you are. So I have to actually, okay, so I can list Quarkus extensions. It will list the extensions that are active in this project. Quarkus is all about extensions. It is the little bits of glue that we add around libraries. They're not required, but they're how we fast forward some of the native stuff. So if you guys have tried to compile with GraalVM and have hit problems because libraries are super complicated or you had to go discover, the whole part of what our extensions do is they try to make sure all that stuff magically happens for you. In the case of the micrometer extension, we're taking, we're not only adding support for micrometer and optimizing it for running in native mode, but I'm adding all kinds of instrumentation for Quarkus so that when you add micrometer to your application, you get good things coming out. So I can list installable extensions. This is something on my to-do list, is to make this list a little nicer, but you can see there's all kinds of extensions that I can, and we have, that's a whole other concept. We'll come back to why camel stuff shows up there some other time if we decide it's still interesting. But I can do a Quarkus extension add. We're going to add micrometer, and I think I want to add, yes, I usually have, long story about what I usually have. Small array open API is another one that's just fun to look at because we're dealing with REST things. So I've just added 2 extensions. If I go back, I think I could have maybe done some of that. I don't even know how I opened that file. Fingers. They're not my friends sometimes. I think to a certain extent, you can add extensions while Quarkus dev is running, and sometimes that will work, but I don't trust it. So I just quit and start again because I'm one of those developers who does what I think is going to work every time and not necessarily what might magically happen just because it's cool. So if I go to dev mode now, it'll pop up my little console now that I've added, like I have small array API on here. There is a metrics endpoint here. If I go to this open API endpoint, oh no, that's not what I want to do. I want to go to the UI so I can see my 2 endpoints and I can test them if I want, which may be relevant in a bit. If I go to, back to Quarkus, I go to Quarkus metrics now. Q, you're laughing at me. What are you doing? Metrics is on. It's messing with me now. I'm really confused. My metrics endpoint isn't there. That's not right. Did I do it right? Is it here? No, it's not. Yes, it is. It's right there. So why didn't it start? Now my pulse is thundering in my ears because that's not supposed to happen. But I have a backup plan. I just was hoping not to have to use it. Rest easy, small rye. Micrometer's there. Health's not there either because health isn't there. All right, I'm officially done with you. All right, I don't know why that didn't work. What I do have running, I believe, if I was smart, which was I smart? What I do have running. At this point, I don't know if I'm smart anymore. 82, 81. Yeah, okay. What I do have running on another app for the metrics endpoint piece, because I want to show this because Joni's here. So with our metrics endpoints, we have a bunch of integrations baked into Quarkus such that without any, look ma, no hands, I have instrumentation coming out for the endpoints. Here you can see there are some error requests coming through on this one. That one was, this is my monster combat application, which I've given many talks about, which makes monsters fight each other ad nauseum until they die. Not because I have a death wish, but because I'm a dungeon master for children and they make me crazy. So I had to do that. So under here with my HTTP server requests, right, I can get metrics out for whatever endpoints I'm hitting. I'm very disturbed that that did not come up for my demo app, which I tested earlier. So something is wrong and I don't know what it is, and I'm scared to touch it. Everything that we have for metrics is baked in. I can start to show you panache stuff. Let me bring my brain back and put it back together. If I add, you guys aren't helping me. You're being very quiet watching me flail around.
In the chat, Carlos had said you may need to include the Quarkus micrometer registry Prometheus extension.
You're freaking right.
Carlos is freaking right. I'm just the
you are
person who read
friggin'
it.
right. I even wrote the damn thing.
And,
I wrote the damn thing, and I forgot.
And Jonathan gets credit too.
Oh man, you guys are both wonderful, but you needed to talk because when I'm melting, I'm not.
Yeah,
I'm not
don't be
watching
shy.
the screen. I won't bite, especially if you save me. And
It's just a normal demo.
I know. And what did I do? Quarkus micrometer registry Prometheus. I did the thing wrong. Micrometer registry. It's this one. You should stop that. Now you autocomplete for me. Yes, that's what I said. Yes.
Hey, while it's running, real quick question. Is there, what format are the metrics surfaced up in? Can you like use Datadog or something for consuming that?
Yes. So micrometer, so the micrometer extension for Quarkus is micrometer.
Got it.
So I don't have the infinite ad nauseum set of
basically anything that micrometer supports submitting, you can.
Almost.
Got it. Okay. Cool.
We have I have a Quarkiverse repository. So we have the extensions that are baked into Quarkus, and then we have a whole other set that are much more friendly for external contribution. I've had a few people contribute basically extensions to enable pick a registry. So we've got a handful here. I'm expecting that we will get more over time. These are not hard to make. They're a very thin layer compared to what the core of the extension does. So the Prometheus extension registry, thank you guys for just saving my brains. Can't believe it just vacated that thoroughly. But anyway, the Prometheus extension is shipped with as part of core. And the rest of these then you can add or use. Obviously you can turn on the micrometer extension without it. That totally works. And then if you didn't want to use Prometheus, if you wanted to use one of the other ones, you can use micrometer without Prometheus, right? You just add the other one instead. So now that should work. And I will stop panicking and life will be great. Right? That's what's going to happen. Yes, you are all my best friends. Okay. And you actually can see with this that the dev mode stuff is showing up and is not substituted. And I think that's because it does not go through. I don't have a rule for that would make it. I can show you how to do that though. So we could say, if we go to our application properties, I'm going to have to remember the syntax for this one too. If I say Quarkus, micrometer, what is it? Quarkus micrometer binder, I don't remember. Not hard, it's just far away. This one, Quarkus micrometer binder, HTTP server match patterns. This is one way to do this, like this. Match patterns. And I can say it is, so I could say q/dev/everything, whatever. Yeah. Like that, I believe. And it should reload that. But I think I might have to restart. I have some testing to do with dev mode and some of the metrics patterns, which is on me to go fix. So now with dev mode, we should see many fewer. Let's see if I go to dev mode pages now. So there's dev mode lighting up. And if I go here, we can now see that dev mode is just all those extra paths beyond dev mode are hidden. They're all wrapped, which is what you want to be able to control the cardinality of your traces. I'm going to make a note right now while we're all here together, because I should just do that out of the box. I know dev mode is on an atypical path for how we serve metrics. And you wouldn't have dev mode in production anyway, but it still is a lot of noise while you're working with your app. So we can turn that extra noise off. So that's how, I don't know, a bunch of things works. What else was I going to show you? Oh, so this was a Maven app. And it comes into dev mode. We can pause and resume things. We can open things in the browser. We can open the dev console in the browser. We have help, we have the UI. You can force a restart. You can listen for live reload. We can toggle how fine-tuned this is, like what kinds of changes to your app it responds to when it's going to restart. This whole dev console thing is freaking amazing, honestly. That's super fun. When we're working with the Quarkus CLI, we can also create one for Gradle. And by specifying Gradle, it will give us a Gradle project. The Gradle tooling does work a little differently in some cases because Gradle wants to do a lot more of the resolution. Quarkus is almost half of a build tool because of how much we're trying to push towards build time. There's a lot more investment and interaction between between Quarkus, what ends up running at runtime, and then all of the build processing and the build steps and the integrations that we have to try to optimize how things are built. So when you come into this, I can still use Quarkus build to compile. And you'll see it will kick off the Gradle daemon and it will build a bunch of Gradle things. We just moved it up to Gradle 6.9, I think. This one is still 6.8.3, I'm not sure why. Oh, because it's 2.02, that's why. So, right, that felt normal. When we're working with Gradle with dev mode, we updated it so that Gradle will run the build. That process will end because of the way the Gradle daemon likes to take over all the console interaction. And then it will start another process. So you still have all of your actual terminal interaction goodness, right? So this is how we work around the Gradle daemon stealing all the console output. So you still get to run your dev mode and do all the fun things, even if you're using Gradle to build. And the other operations also work. The other one we can do now, as of 202, 201, is we can create a JBang project. And I do want to show you a JBang project for a hot second, just because it is ludicrously different. So if we do a Quarkus create of a CLI application and we use JBang for it, we will create a Pico CLI app. These CLI apps are, that's what Quarkus is. Quarkus itself is a CLI app. That one just went to code with Quarkus because I didn't specify a name. So if I go there, here's what this thing looks like. Oh, and I'm still in VS Code. Whoops, I forgot to get out. Let's go in. Let's go back in this way. I could have opened the folder, but I'm lazy. So here we have, this is what, when I say Max is busy breaking all the rules of Java. So here's a JBang project that uses Quarkus. There's a Quarkus core under the hood. Actually, this one may not. This one may be just Pico CLI. I think I have to yell at Max. But we've got the, yes, Quarkus is under here. We've got a Pico CLI under here. And it's just, he's broken the editor as far as I'm concerned. With how different it looks. But here's your dependencies right there. And it's using, there's a big explanation of how this works. But JBang projects are pretty hilarious generally. Lowercase m's, like it's just basically, if it was a rule in Java, Max broke it. But it's very fun. So if you haven't gone and looked at that, you should. What else can I show you?
Aaron, could you show real quick as another option, just the project generator at code.quarkus.io?
Oh, sure. Yeah, that's a good option too. So code.quarkus.io is the other way you would start a project. And this also is under constant improvement. And for this one, right, we're actually working on another release is going to be soon. So that should be fun. But this one lets you browse a little more if you prefer that. So we could pick a reactive. We can do rest easy reactive. Still have experimental stuff all over the place.
Yeah, it's becoming a little cumbersome because there are so many extensions now.
We have stuff coming.
400? Is there over 400 now?
Yeah, we have stuff coming to make this a little easier to sort out. But if you download the zip, then it'll tell you how to do that. No, Aaron. You guys are all like, holy shoot, does she really type like this? I'll be like, yes, this is really how I type. There. So I can still look at what this did. And so this brought in rest easy reactive. So you should see the different rest easy reactive and rest client reactive. So one of these is the old name, I think. I'll have to ask. I think they did that wrong. I don't think it matters, but. So here again, we have an example of a reactive greeting. We have an example of the test. We could reproduce more or less verbatim what we did before if we wanted to. One of the things we could look at though is I'm totally cheating and playing chef in the background right here. I can create a client, a REST client here. And this one has both an async pattern using that returns a uni. It's a bit of mutiny in here. And it also returns a string. And so we can, the way you use clients, right? So I have that interface which defines it. And then I have the injection of that interface, which is what I invoke to actually use it. So basically this one is one that's capable of calling itself in a way. So what I need to make this all work happily is a couple more things. So it's looking for ping pong messages. So we're going to have some ping pong messages because ultimately we're trying to call back on ourselves. Now, the quick thing that you'll notice here is blocking. I think I might try to do it without it just so you can see what happens. What Rest Easy Reactive tries to do is it tries to make it easy for you to write applications that will run on the event loop. So in the case that I have a method that just returns a string, this is not a blocking method. It's just going to return, so it won't cause a problem. But these two methods call something else that could potentially be blocking. So if I do Quarkus build, it'll yell at me, I'm pretty sure, because this method, this ping method, performs a potentially blocking operation on the event loop. And so what we do is we have this blocking annotation where we try to say this should be forked off to another thread. It should be maybe it's at runtime. Let's go to dev mode. It'll yell at me. It will yell at me. Question is when. I think we're actively talking about how soon we should be able to yell at people. But it should be yelling at me, unless I didn't save it. That's the other problem. Maybe I didn't save it. I don't know. Am I missing a config? That's the next thing I'm going to be missing is a config. Because I need to configure that REST client to go to localhost. That goes to me. And you can tell it's looking for a config key called ping pong. So I'm telling it that ping pong np rest URL is myself. That allows me to do the deferred initialization later. I don't like that it's not failing exactly the way I know it should. So if I load the dev URI now, I'm in Rest Easy Reactive. It's going to show me my endpoints. And if I do this, does it know? If I do, why did it wait that long? There's it. I was pretty sure it was going to give me that error a lot earlier, but it did eventually make it. Maybe I'm used to seeing it during test, and that's why I think it's during a build. It's because I always saw this. It's probably what it is I always saw this when writing my tests. So in my head, I'm seeing it during a build, but it's during a test run. So anyway, what it's trying to say is, hey, here's your REST request, and we want to make this non-blocking thing on the event loop. So it answers really fast, except that you did something that was going to take too long, and that's bad. So please add this indicator that says this is not, like, either use a non-blocking client call or add a blocking annotation. So we do try to give, heads up warning. So you notice, like, if I go and do the async ping message, I go back, got that, and I do hello async ping with my message. What did I do? That one's a 404. What did I do? Async ping. That's what I did. It says there's a 404 because why? This one should be fine. because it doesn't like me and the world is mean. I don't know.
Probably
Client
the-
Pong, both of those should come here. We can fix this one and say blocking. And it should be fine. I need to fix the import. Anyway, you guys have been very good sports watching me flail around. If I do the other one again, it should be fine. It should be fixed. Ding. Did it fix it? No, now it said that.
Looks like Carlos said,
Yeah.
we don't have a Pong endpoint, and the client is trying to call that
We
one.
should have a Pong endpoint because it's
Yeah.
right there.
Never mind. I saw it now.
Oh, sorry.
Nope, you're brilliant because, oh, no, but you're not. You're right. This is wrong. You're right. Ping and Pong. And when I do the ping rest client, that goes to, yes, I think that may have been the problem. You're still smarter than me. Or at least your brains work better. No, that's right. This doesn't like that either. But you're right. It's the chaining of the URLs because this. No, it's because I'm missing the client link. You're smart. You're exactly right. This is now going to be the problem. Because I have to take this off too, I believe. And then, but then we overlap. This should be client. Then that will match that. So if I say client ping, I should still land here. That goes to ping pong, which just gets mapped to this thing, which goes to client pong. It does work. This is why you don't write clients to talk to themselves. It just is not even what you're supposed to do. Did that work?
You can use the client on the test.
Well, this is why you're not supposed to write tests to yourself. This is a total artificial silliness anyway. So what happens is, okay, so I have the Pong endpoint. Yes? Yes. Okay, so when I call on the server, my client ping endpoint, it maps using the REST client to this ping pong path. I still end up coming here, this ping pong path, that's my map, which translates it into a client Pong message, which lands here. So this is mapping my outbound ping message. It goes to ping pong, which is this method, which takes it to that server side URL, which is back to myself from the top. So you were right, or whoever said that was right, that this was the problem at the beginning, is that I forgot I had hello up there. That's what I get for cutting and pasting to try to put things together. But, and then there's the async ping, which is unis the whole way. And this one should also be fine now. Yes, that should also be fine now. So that one, and the thing is, like this one, because it's returning a uni, it's okay doing the outbound of the REST client, which also returns a uni. Right, so we're doing reactive calls all the way back, and it just comes back, and you don't need any special blocking behavior to get it off the event loop to do that. It's all part of reactive processing, so that it doesn't chew up the thread. When we look at, what else can we look at? Tracing things, or do you guys want to see, I don't know, what do you want to see? How Panache works. That's something I can say. I know how it works, but I'm not really awesome at writing database queries. I like skipped that part. I wrote low-level Corba, and then I wrote some CouchDB applications, and I just skipped JPA and JTA, and I let other smart people do that.
What about the Spring compatibility stuff, or to showcase some of the Spring stuff?
Sure. So with the Spring stuff, part of what we try to do, and this is less like, I would not consider this an attack on Spring or anything. I worked with Spring in my time at IBM quite a bit. I think it's more an acknowledgement that Spring has its own programming model and its own way of, like, its own interfaces and APIs and things that people are very accustomed to how that works. And we want to meet them where they are. And so we do have a collection of extensions for Quarkus, for Spring Web, for Spring Data, that we try to allow those, that programming model to work as you would expect on a Quarkus base. I should be super clear. This is not taking inner libraries of Spring and running them. Like, we're not taking all of Spring Data and running that on Quarkus. Some of the stuff that I did when I started on Quarkus was, oh goodness, it was in the middle of Spring Data JPA. It was taking some of the Spring Data annotations and things and mapping them onto Panache, where Panache is an optimization for working with databases in JPA. It'll support a couple different modes, and it optimizes some things in a similar but different way than Spring Data does. But we've tried to make them compatible because we know that that's where people's brains are, and that's what they're used to. So we have, like, if I can just scroll through this. Can you guys? Is this big enough? I mean, I'm just showing you. This is just the Spring Web guide, but it will give you the idea, right? So if you're used to creating a Spring controller, you can still create a Spring controller, right? But how that is interpreted is not using Spring components, right? We've mapped those onto the appropriate Quarkus pieces so that they start up and behave the way you would expect. The get and the post and the put, all of that stuff is mapped appropriately onto underlying types. And again, especially because Spring is so annotation driven and Quarkus does so much annotation scanning, it's fairly easy for us to do that adaptation at build time and make sure that we can adapt across. But that is basically what we're doing. We are working within the expectations of the annotations that you are defining. And we're doing that.
Do those annotations work for both the reactive and non-reactive set?
I was just thinking about that. I'm like, I think so. I'm pretty sure it works. It definitely goes. We haven't done WebFlux yet because that was something that was on my list. So I haven't gone through to do, maybe that's what I'll do next. Once the CLI is a little better, then maybe I'll go fuss around with WebFlux. I like WebFlux. So trying to get the WebFlux stuff to work was something that I wanted to poke around with. But the traditional REST mapping, what I was actually thinking about when you asked the question was whether or not these request mappings are going onto REST Easy reactive or onto REST Easy, and I don't think they care. I think it works for either. Let's try. Let's see what happens if we get out of this and let's prove it. We will know the answer in 5 seconds. If I say Quarkus, create app, Spring Web. I'll call it Spring Web because I'm imaginative. I don't know. Let's see what it brings. So it's got a Spring Web code start that it created. So if I go to Spring Web and I open it here, what do we got? What do we got? What do we got? Well, that doesn't help me. It's way buried. I forget what Spring Web sits on. Dependency tree, I guess. I don't feel like doing that. That's like, does anybody want to see Maven dependency? We can do that. Dependency tree, sure. It's going to be tons. Oh, that's not too bad. That's Quarkus test. You can see Gizmo. Gizmo is the best, one of the best named libraries ever. But that's one of the things that we used to do a lot of bytecode stuff. Where is it? There's Quarkus Arc, Spring Web, Rest Easy. It's regular Rest Easy. So it's not Rest Easy reactive at this time. That's the answer to my question. So the Spring Web stuff is going on top of the normal Rest Easy stack. So it's not on top of the Rest Easy reactive stack, which also makes sense because it would be weird to mix in the blocking annotation and some other things. So
yeah, it's and with we do have some, everything that we're doing now is using Webflux, but for some developers it's easier for them to still write REST controllers, and it does support those annotations on the Spring side.
Yes,
but generally we don't do that too often. I was just curious.
Yeah, no, it's a good question, because the closer we get, I think the concern is probably long-term going to be the expectation of people that are still using the older pure REST APIs, and making sure that that behavior is stable, where when you start mixing reactive semantics, it can get really confusing. And so if you're using Spring's imperative style on top of something else's reactive stack, I think that could get really confusing. But it's something I want to think about anyway. So Rest Easy Reactive has some really nice stuff with it. It's similar in that you can mix. So it's not what the way that Springs is, but you can mix your imperative, like actually you could see it from that REST for my silly ping pong client, right? I had it reactive and imperative annotations mixed together. So that's just all, it's all a hot mess. You can just do whichever. But
Aaron, do you feel comfortable showing some of the native compilation stuff in terms of like the,
well, yeah, that's fine.
Go in your own order. I was just kind of curious.
No,
we've covered that.
At this point, like my script died, I think the second or third time my brain failed trying to remember how to get Prometheus working. So, which I know all the time, I wrote the damn thing. So that just tells you where my brain is. So it's just nowhere. When you're building.
Sorry to interrupt. This is awesome. Thank you so much, Aaron. And I love the unscripted on the spur of the moment thing. I know we're a little quiet, but absorbing a lot of information. And I, for one, would love to see the native stuff. So thank you.
That's why I like seeing a couple faces, because you guys are not picking your nose, or, you're nodding, or so it's good. So, I mean, not that everybody picks their nose, so there's no judgment. That's the best underrated line in whatever movie that is. Frozen. Ever since I saw it, every time I see my little nephew, it's like, oh, are you picking your nose? And eats it. So gross, but it's great. Kids are funny. So with native code, when you're working with native code, this can get a little interesting. So I have a Mac, and if I do Quarkus build and I do native here, oops, actually, before I do that, because of what I'm going to show you, I should do my little trick. Oh shoot, is it GraalVM 11? Yeah, I almost had it memorized. Oh, fine, you're gonna make me do it properly because whatever. Anyway, when you're running with native mode on a Mac, if I do Quarkus dev, if I use the CLI, I can do Quarkus dev, build is what I want to do. And I can say native, please build it in native mode. And it'll go and it'll do that. It'll take a little bit of time to do so. It's going to scan the projects. And this is where it'll run the tests, and then Graal will go and analyze your application. Except what did I do? What is my test failure now? Now I broke something. Well, you're not fun. What did I break?
Can you bypass the tests in the command line? I can't remember.
Yes. No tests, I think. That's the other one. That's the Spring Web one. But yes, you can bypass tests. But here's where the native build runner will go, and it will start to analyze all of your classes to do the additional optimizations and bake your bake the native image. Now what's interesting is I'm running this natively with GraalVM, so I will end up with a Mac binary, a Mac native binary. I can also set a property to use a container to build my native image. And the image that will be built in that way is a Linux container image. It's a Linux native image, not a Mac native image, because it's not a cross compiler in that way, right? And the problem that I have, cat bomb, is that if I'm running, so if one of my applications, my Monster Combat application that I showed you a little bit earlier, that one uses containers, and it uses so I build container images, but I also build them locally. And so I get into this situation where I can't run my tests after I built my images because the native images are all named the same. So it's on my short list to make sure that we have a Darwin, or we have a platform indicator on there, so we're not overwriting our own images, because that starts to show you a little better how things work. It's still, native compilation takes a long time. When you understand what it does, it makes sense that it takes a long time. It has a lot to evaluate. It takes a lot of memory too, because it's inflating a bunch of stuff to check permutations and then figure out how to optimize it and compile it all down again.
Aaron, to help you fill some time, I'm gonna make sure I get this right. So 2.0 of Quarkus community came out a couple weeks ago. The minimum version for GraalVM now, if you're using 2.0, is Graal 11, correct? And if you use
Java, it's Java version. So as of 2.0, right here, as of 2.0, we dropped support for Java 8.
Correct.
Right.
If
so
it's
Java 11.
You can use 8. Yep.
Yes, it's Java 11. Quarkus does have some preferences about the version of Graal. So far, I had 21.0 installed, and this one did not yell at me. So we haven't had to move up yet, but at some point we will probably say 22. The trick with native images is that because of, and Joni, I know we just had an issue go through with Micrometer that we had fixed, because some of the native image, like some of the native stuff we tried to do to address changes for Java 16, like didn't work. I forget exactly what the order was, but like it was like we literally couldn't, we tried to put something in to be good, but it broke. The native image stuff is really flaky. Flaky is the wrong word. It's just finicky. It's very picky about what it wants, and in what order. Oh, and apparently it's nighttime. All of my IDE windows just flipped over from dark to light. Anything that was time sensitive anyway. So there, I'm done. So if I look under my Spring app, under the target directory, I have my little runner at 35 megs. That seems big, but 35 megs.
That was the job or the Spring app?
But that's, the Quarkus app is what I'm looking for. The runner, the Quarkus app should be.
I'm sorry, but that was the Spring extensions though that were with that.
Under Quarkus app is, my brain really is toast. You guys are seeing post vacation brain too. That doesn't help. I had a good vacation. Wiped it all off. That's where our run, that's where our we have changed the way we build things. So the runner jar that you see, or some of the jars there, the fat jar that have everything. This is the fast jar, which is layer friendly. I believe it is this one. Yes, that's my native image, is the runner. And so I want to put some platform specific stuff at the end, so you know that that's what it is. But that's everything. That's all that there is.
So that was startup time of 0.026. That's
Yeah.
26 milliseconds.
Yeah. Yeah, that's instant on, basically. Of course, I didn't add anything to it. I didn't add anything hard. With my app, with my Monster Combat application, it does quite a bit. If I go into no, you're not going to let me do it either, are you? That's not what I wanted. There, I win. Was anybody else around a long time ago? Did anybody else talk to their computers when they used to take forever loading up? Is that just me? If I do Maven install on this one and I turn native on, I want it's my micrometer stuff. This one is a bit more complicated. It'll take a second still to compile. If it'll let me do it. I'm not going through my stuff. So I don't know why this one's mad now either. Why is everything there today? I don't know. The native stuff is pretty good. I'm getting the native things to work. If you want to look at something interesting, how do I show this to you? I'll bring this down and we'll make this. This is all the crap I had open to try to have cheat sheets. Can you guys read? Is it too small?
Looks good for me, but I have a bigger monitor.
Okay.
That's good. Good. Fine.
Cool. All right. So if I show you while things are kind of stewing in the background, if I show you how the micrometer extension works, for example, just to give you an idea of what this stuff is doing. We call it at deployment time. And for those of us who have worked on app servers forever, that kind of gives you feelings that it would be later in the process, but this is at actual build time. We're looking at some of the processors and stuff that we're doing. We're actually looking at annotations. We have build steps that determine, it's like the way of dynamically injecting additional steps into the build process. So that's why I mentioned a little earlier that Quarkus is almost as much a build tool as it is a runtime. And these build steps are part of how extensions contribute to the compilation and production of your images. It's more than just here's some code, right? So we're actually doing things to add or remove things from the application path. We're adding additional beans. So we are basically programmatically creating, Joni, this would be the equivalent of a Spring Bean, but it's a CDI bean, right? But the concept is similar, but we're just actually on purpose creating additional beans. We're registering, we're telling CDI programmatically that there will be interceptors or there will be additional annotations to be aware of. But again, this is the extension. So I'm doing this so that your apps don't have to, right? So I'm actively telling it what it's going to need to look for. I go and look for any implementation of a micrometer meter registry, or a meter binder, or a meter filter, or a naming convention, right? All of the things that are parts of micrometer, I go and I look for things that implement or are subclasses of those things, so that I can make sure that those are discovered as beans. And then we do some additional processing. We register some things for reflection, including some of the histogram classes that we need in native mode, to get the histograms to work in native mode. We need reflections for some of the counted and timed annotations, because those are used with interceptors. So the annotations have to be there so that the interceptors can see their attributes. One of the more interesting things that I did with the micrometer extension was adapt the microprofile metrics annotations so that they would be used, they would map onto micrometer. So this was an additional case of registering an additional API for indexing, looking for an additional set of annotations to be registered and detected as beans for use with this annotation. I happen to log a warning so that people know that a compatibility mode is happening. But this is where stuff starts to get really interesting. And like, as an extension writer, this is where some of the biggest challenges were too. So I'm doing annotation transformation here. So I'm taking some of their annotations, and in some cases with these annotation transformers, I'm taking an annotation in. If they had a metered annotation, I'm turning it into a counted annotation. If they have a simply timed annotation, I'm turning it into a timed annotation. If they have both a counted annotation and a timed annotation, I have that somewhere. Where the hell is it? I don't know. If they have both a counted annotation and a timed annotation, I remove the counted annotation, because as Joni will tell you, the timer already has a counter, so why are you doing both? So we just suppress the one. It just happens. The runtime does it, and it does give you a warning, but that's it. It also, like, they have an annotation for creating gauges dynamically. And I have an annotation handler that effectively uses Gizmo to create a class on the fly. So I create a bean that holds their gauge at build time. And that's how I handle that annotation. Where they would have created a widget, we're using bytecode creation to basically create an object at build time that's then just present, and it gets run. And it holds the value. And it was when you start to do bytecode generation like this that you start to realize that you really are writing the code that will run later. And how you have to think about what you're writing when you're writing code that's going to run later can be a brain bender sometimes.
Hey, Aaron, I wanted to step in and make a point as we're talking about native. One of the things we often hear is we hear that Quarkus is tightly related to native, but that couldn't be further from the truth. And remember, there's really two options to deploy a Quarkus app. One is on the JVM, one is native. And so there are still significant improvements and performance improvements with running on JVM. And then, I always think of the native compilation as kind of like the cherry on top of the sundae, where it can go an additional step further if your situation calls for it, right? If your extension is supported or your libraries are supported. So I want to make sure we don't tightly associate Quarkus with just native compilation using GraalVM. It's really much more than that. We see a lot of our users,
all of the stuff that I just talked about the extension doing is over and above what Graal would do. I think I would say it's fair to there is a strong guiding premise, I would say, when we look at how to integrate a new library. This is what I said earlier, or when we look at how Hibernate Reactive is going to work with Quarkus or any of those things, we're very much looking at the impact that will have on native mode. Like it does shape our decisions for how we want something to run in JVM mode also. So, you know, like the intent or the assumption that people are going to want to run in native mode, or that it should run well in native mode, very much drives how we do things. It is a driving concern in how we solve problems and how we decide to integrate a library. But it's definitely not a requirement to run in native or even with Graal.
There's an echo. But anyways, any comments on running native images on like serverless, like Lambda or Cloud Functions or something, or like any comments on that? Like, is you know, startup time's not an issue there, or I don't know if any pointers there.
One thing, while Aaron's noodling on something, one thing that we hear that people like, and this isn't for everyone, but one of the extensions that Quarkus has is called Funky,
Yes.
Funky.
I was going to say that one, yeah.
What's really interesting about it is that you could, with that extension, you could write your application or your function or your method, whatever it may be, and it gives you the ability, it abstracts away and gives you the ability to deploy to Azure Functions, AWS, or Google. It basically abstracts away, and you can quickly deploy.
You guys should have Bill come and show you what he's doing. I don't know the server, like I know I've written serverless apps, but I was bad and I wrote them in JavaScript. I know that makes me the devil, but I did. So you should have Bill back and you should have him show you what he's been doing, because it's pretty cool. And I think what he's working on right now is basically a live, like using the Quarkus dev console that I showed you, but working on a live debug development kind of environment for your Lambdas, like for your functions. So you can just stay in the dev mode and work on your function written in Java, and you're not going insane having to do some weird round trippy thing.
That's pretty cool. Yeah, would love to have him come present at some point.
Yeah, you should have him come back and do that. It is really cool. It's just not something I put in my head recently.
I'm trying to find a video with it.
Cool.
He was on Quarkus Insights last 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks ago, maybe.
Yep. Going to Funky Town.
Yeah,
that's what the session was called. Here, I'll put a link. I apologize. I've been putting a ton of links in the chat, probably too many. But as we were talking about things, I was trying to give people quick links to see some of this stuff.
Yeah, no, that's good, especially since I was spending a lot of time trying to not freak out with demos.
Yeah, I have a question, Erin and Jeff. I don't know if you know a way, but the one thing that I wanted to do like long time ago, I'm not sure it's already there on Quarkus because I didn't test the 2.0 yet. Is there a way that I can run the application with GraalVM in JVM mode and profile the application and save information about, you know, all the reflection and things, that the magic that we do in the JVM mode, and then pass that profile to the GraalVM when we're generating the binaries in order to improve that?
That's an interesting question. I know that Quarkus itself already remembers a lot. I don't know. It's a good question. It's a good question to ask on Quarkus Dev. I would want to see if there's a workflow for you. I'm not the expert, but if you posted to the Quarkus Dev list, I can think of a couple people who would respond off the top of my head, and they might have a workflow for you.
Cool, thanks. I'll ask them. Thanks.
One other thing, Aaron, I wanted to mention too, and you could add some color to this is along the lines of this extension ecosystem is really, I think, one of the most powerful parts of Quarkus. And not everyone is deploying these applications to Kubernetes or even in containers, but there are some great extensions for both Kubernetes and OpenShift, if that's the flavor of Kubernetes people are using, that give you the ability to do a one command line deployment, which is we hear is really nice. Anything you want to add to that? Because don't we use Docker? Doesn't it build the Docker file for you and all that good jazz?
So I have a Quarkus extension, and there are a couple of them in there besides mine. It does do, so like my Quarkus extension, which I briefly showed earlier, there's a whole bunch of stuff I don't have to deal with having my extension of extensions in Quarkus. It does all the Maven publishing for me. It does like the whole release process, all the blah, 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 blah. There's a whole bunch of stuff I don't have to deal with. There are Antora docs that are published as part of this so that I don't have to do it. I just have to make sure that the ASCII docs are there, and then there's pretty docs up in the sky. So that part's all good. But just within Quarkus, we have some pretty cool extensions that that people have been working on and that we use for various things. So we have an extension that does the Google Cloud Services, for example. So it has a bunch of the CRED stuff, and Spanner and storage, and Bigtable, BigQuery. Like it's got a whole bunch of integrations for all that stuff, which is awesome. We have one for logging to Splunk. This one has proven a little interesting. So we have a pretty good GitHub app extension right now, and we've used that for a couple different things. One of them is the bot that we use for all of our GitHub actions. So this is an extension for Quarkus that we use to write a bot to manage our Quarkus builds, right? This is very good. So it does all kinds of things. We had another person put together a triage bot based on this extension that goes through and just lists the issues and stuff that you want, that are relevant to you, gives you a report back as like a, tootle around thing. We have an RabbitMQ client. We have some open tracing with Datadog. Well, here's a more generic one for just the GitHub API. We have another one for logging to CloudWatch. There's a couple, there's an attempt at RSocket. I didn't know, that's 5 days ago. I don't know how that's going. I haven't looked at that one very much myself yet. But the ecosystem is growing. It's a nice, I don't know, sometimes making an extension for Quarkus is super trivial, or just enabling a library for Quarkus is super trivial. It's when you want to do something to really optimize how things are working that it can take a little longer. Where did my chat window go?
I've been kind of browsing through what's out here, and like some of the things that I know that I add to Spring Boot apps, for example, I'm seeing a lot of, analogs for them, right? Like I normally am always adding, in addition to, a web flux and actuator, things like that, which we kind of covered. I normally am also adding Sleuth, and it looks like there's some tracing libraries out here. I'm often adding, a Kafka client. I see one of those out there. Another thing I do with OpenAPI, our apps are usually built, at least recently, we've been building from OpenAPI the other direction. And it looks like maybe there's a library out there for that, where we build the OpenAPI first and then generate producers and things like that. And it looks like I see an app for that out there as well. So that's very cool.
Yeah. I'm curious.
Aaron,
wait, I have a question back for you. I have to ask this. If you're doing API first development, which is great, because I've done it all the ways, do you use something like package testing or anything like that to do any contract validation stuff, or do you just generate and go?
We are generally generating and going, yeah.
It's great. I was just asking. I'm trying to figure out, because I've only everybody likes the idea of contract testing, but the number of people I've seen actually get there is like super small. So I wanted to ask. Sorry.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Hey, so
Greg, while you're off mute.
Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, Greg had mentioned that they have a Java team, but they're writing their serverless in Python, and that's incredibly interesting to us, because this was one of the reasons, or one of the use cases we see with Quarkus, is that you don't have Java shops don't have to learn Python if they don't want to. I'd be curious if, as you dig in maybe to some of the serverless capabilities, what your thoughts are. So love to hear more later on if you guys are interested in taking a look at that.
Yeah, and I did mention, I mentioned that for mainly convenience reasons, right? Like it's just so easy to get something up that we've been, we don't have a ton of things out there. We're often using it for POCs and things like that for a lot of our serverless stuff, but often those end up being in Python just because we can get them up very easy. We don't have to think too much about how we want to deploy Java in a serverless way, or can be concerned about start times and things like that. So we have done a bunch of that. So it's interesting to think about alternatives there.
Yeah. Yeah, you'll want to see the funky stuff. There's two things I can think about with the startup time. I'm sorry, I think that was the question you asked earlier. With the startup time with serverless, and I think part of that has to do with the images that are used when you're deploying. Because I think Amazon has done a lot. They have an image that they want you to use, and the reason they do that is because that way you're only, they're not, your start time is really small because they're not having to reload an image, and it's counterintuitive because I think in some cases a JVM mode using their image will load faster than a native mode because of how much shared stuff they have between all of their JVM based things.
That would be very fascinating to actually learn more about, because that exactly sounds counterintuitive, but yeah.
Well, I mean, this is the thing, like we've spent 20 years working on shared class caches, right? We spent so many years, and native mode busts all of that off into its own unique space. But anyway, Bill is the person to have back.
Cool.
I think
cool.
you should
hey,
have him.
quick time check. So we're like about an hour and a half in, and I'm sure we could continue all night. I mean, this is just an interesting topic, and unless there are other things that you want to talk about there, Aaron. I know you're sort of, like I said, bravely just plowing through and doing it kind of ad hoc.
I'm annoyed that some of my stuff isn't working, but that's what always happens when you try to go off.
No, that's
I do have, if any of you, Joni has come to some of my talks before because he likes, I think it's my internet, unless I spelled it with 3 L's. No, the world just hates me today. Anyway, I have stuff out. I did air hacks with Adam, probably most recently. I don't usually highlight my own stuff like this. There's reasons I had to go find it all, but I do have a history of my talks. So if you want to go watch any of those, you can be like, oh yeah, her stuff does work. And she can talk and type sometimes at the same time.
Awesome. Maybe you can post it in the chat there. Actually, I'm going to go through and actually feel free to do this yourself, but if you're going to post some of the links that are in the chat to the in the meetup comments, that would be great. Or I can do it later. I was planning to do that. You should be able to save the chat there.
Yeah, I'm on Twitter and whatever. So if you can find me, it's fine. Come find me. Come ask questions.
LinkedIn connection waiting for me there. So. But yeah, was there anything else you wanted to talk about? Or I mean, again, that was an awesome overview of all the various features and capabilities. In my opinion, I really enjoyed it.
Well, good.
There's one last thing I wanted to mention, Aaron, and this is not a pitch for Red Hat. I just want to be careful and preface that. But one thing that Red Hat recently did, I think, is interesting. If you're thinking about Kubernetes and in the world of OpenShift, we have provided a free hosted Kubernetes solution called the Developer Sandbox. It's I think it's got 30. Let me look real quick. 30 free days. One button. I think all you gotta do is register for the developer program, which is very non-invasive. You get, let me see here, 30 days, 4 vCPUs, 8 gigabytes of RAM, up to 3 projects, all these things. It's a really interesting way to start looking at if you don't want to set up your own Kubernetes environment. It's easy to set up, and there's a bunch of getting started with Quarkus's projects up there. So it's really nice. So once again, not trying to pitch it, but it's free. It's a nice little trial that we just came up with recently. So that's the only thing I wanted to say.
That was here.
Yeah, it's hiding somewhere there. Yep.
That one. I think my system is officially deciding it's done with me because I couldn't even bring this back up. So something else is mad at me. The universe has decided I've pissed it off. I don't know. It'll get over
And then Aaron, if you can go to
exhausted,
slide 20, I'm gonna get you guys some t-shirts. I'll work with Nimrat. We can get
These
sizes.
are the coolest t-shirts too. They're like 3/4 sleeve and super light. Like they're awesome.
Now, I will say one
Say
thing,
it.
they tend to run smaller, we've been hearing. So size up. If we'll get your sizes and then we can send you guys some t-shirts and guitar picks and those kind of things.
But I really love them. I love that t-shirt. I sadly forgot and wore it yesterday. 'Cause I'm so excited.
Eric, did you say you had a GraalVM topic that you wanted to talk about?
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah. Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, so GraalVM is something that I was familiar with at Red Hat. I used to work with Jeff and Aaron there. So I went over to work at Solo. And so we have an API gateway product that is based on the Envoy proxy. And Envoy is actually written in C++. And you can add filter capabilities to the Envoy proxy. But typically those are also written in C++, right? But we had a requirement from a customer to actually implement XML transformations and incorporate those into the Envoy proxy and our API gateway product. And because I had experience with GraalVM at Red Hat, I was able to figure out how I could compile the Saxon XSLT transformer to native code. And Saxon is written in Java, right? It's open source project. I was able to compile it down to a C compatible library that we could bring into the Envoy proxy and build a filter with.
That is insane.
Yeah.
That is nuts.
Yeah.
That
So
puts
not only
like
can you build
several
those
big expensive appliances I can think of.
Yeah. It performs amazing. So not only can you build these executables, but you can build libraries too. And it really opens up whole new use cases for Java, I think, because.
Well, that's part of the thing with Pico CLI and what JBang is trying to do is, yeah, to make it easier to use Java outside of the big formal project structure.
Yeah.
Too. But that's cool.
Very, very cool stuff. And do I smell a talk there? Is that what I'm hearing?
Oh, on my topic?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't heard of Saxon in like
it sure
years,
sounds like
if not decades or something. So, well, I mean, we're booked through October right now, which, by the way, I'm more than happy to adjust that if we can certainly have 2 talks a month, which we've had in the past. But
Eric
I don't
is
want
that Eric is giving that face like this is the talk I wish I would have given in the past.
Which I don't want to put you too much on the spot there. So
So I put a link into the chat. I actually have a webinar on this.
Oh, cool.
This month. I actually finished the recording of it yesterday. I tried to make it fun and interesting. There's like a Back to the Future theme, like a Back to the Future movie. So if you want to find out more, yeah, feel free to join. I talk a little bit about the Java aspect to it. But if you still are using SOAP or XML, you may find it interesting.
Totally is cool. Back to the Future. Yeah, totally is Back to the Future. Awesome.
But I will put out there my endorsement for Quarkus. It's a great product. Blows Spring Boot away at this point for any sort of containerized, applications. Highly recommend it. So.
Competition is always a good thing, even in the open source world. So awesome. Great. Any other last comments, anything from the audience before we kind of wrap up? All right.
Thank you guys for sorting me out when I was lost. Thank you.
Thank you for presenting, Aaron. And
yeah, thanks, Aaron.
It's really an awesome presentation. Watching real stuff is way better than slides, frankly. So this is awesome. And Jeff, thanks for organizing this. Eric, appreciate you coming, and everybody else, again, appreciate you coming and for the diehards there. Appreciate everybody kind of hanging out. I know we lost some of the audience along the way, but it was a fun talk that I really enjoyed. So let me make sure I stop the recording. All right, there we go.